Facebook page, go to the video, because as always, all videos that go to Facebook, certainly on personal accounts, they are usually just to friends only when it comes to live video. I'm just making sure that's now public, which means you can then share that post on to anyone and everyone. Share it onto a group of your choice. Just spread the word, basically. But of course, we have ourselves our Twitch viewers, or should I say our Twitch viewer. I still can't get myself any kind of audience on Twitch just yet, but we're working on it. So that's all on the way. But we are, of course, streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, on Periscope, which means if you are a subscriber to any of those platforms, you should have got a notification. So thank you very much indeed. If you're about to join us, spread the word, retweet the live stream, and let them know that we are on a Wednesday going live with Talkin Con, a cup of tea with Englishman in San Diego. As always, thank you very much indeed to all of our Patreon supporters. I've been starting to put some stuff up on the channel, of course, including a video which I posted yesterday, which I'm still waiting to see if I'm going to be getting myself into a bit of trouble over that, because it was from about 3-4 years ago, and this is where Caroline runs from the kitchen now and just goes, "You uploaded that thing?" Yes, it was the video where I kind of stuck myself in the exhibition floor. I'll say no more. If you are a... I did, but I put it private. And just for the Patreon supporters, which means if you do want to go to the Patreon, you can see that video, and you can kind of get your San Diego Comic-Con or Convention Center fix by checking that out. It doesn't cost much, and it just throws a little bit of support our way. And we are talking years later, so I don't think I'll be in too much trouble. But still, yes, I kind of abused some privilege on that one, but never mind. And of course, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you want to talk about today, do jump in on the comments. It's probably best to go to YouTube. But of course, if you go to the Facebook, go to any of the Twitter, it comes through and will come into the comments. For example, we've got Into the Blue Mister. Hello all from sunny Lalini. Go on, Leonard, have a go at the pronunciation. Listen, I'm married to a Welshwoman and I have no clue how to pronounce it. So that's entirely my fault. Russ has joined us literally as I hit go on the intro, so I haven't really had the chance to say hello to him just yet.
I've been listening to you for about 2.5 minutes.
Is that what it is? So you don't want to hear me waffle on for you for 3 minutes like Mike's just had, talking about pandemic haircuts, which is just how inane our conversation got.
Well, that's why I'm wearing a hat.
Why do you think I wear mine? Okay, so it's the top of the hour. It's 6 o'clock. It's 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. It's Wednesday. It's Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. My name's Leonard Sultana, and each and every Wednesday and Sunday we talk Comic-Cons, con culture, and all the stuff and nonsense that goes on around them. Obviously, not as much of the first part because of all the conventions which have fallen by the wayside throughout summer. But I did promise that we were going to get into one convention on the Sunday show, which we didn't get time to get round to because it got into quite an involved conversation. So we kind of ran out of time. But certainly by the end of this show, in the final 10 minutes, we will be talking about Tampa Bay. We'll talk about Tampa Bay, we'll talk about London Film and Comic Con, and we'll talk about those shows that can feel that they can run even as early as July. And we'll even also talk a little bit about Star Wars Celebration and how it could possibly run in Anaheim, considering that a major show from November at that building has cancelled. We'll get into all of that at the back end. Pam's watching. Hello there, Pam. Welcome along. Yeah, any comments and questions, anything you want to get into, it's all about you. It's our community that comes together on a Wednesday and Sunday. Please do dive in. We're going to dive in with our guests as well because we've got two great guys, and I really want to get into talking to them. They're fantastic people to talk to. We have got ourselves Mike Avila, and we've got RUSS BURLINGAME. Hello there, chaps. How the devil are you?
How's it going, folks?
Russ, good to see you.
Good, great to see you. This is the first time you and I have actually done anything together professionally instead of just like hanging out at shows.
Really?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, then in that case, because I was absolutely under the impression that you two would have been kind of like Yeah, you've done something in terms of live stream before now.
No, we like each other quite a lot. It's just a question of working for competing outlets, both of which have a lot of video demands.
Yeah, I end up seeing Russ every year outside of our studio at the Hilton Bayfront in San Diego. Every single year, as he's running from one room to another, and I'm like taking a break. You know, for some reason, every year in San Diego, I end up seeing him one of those benches out of our studio.
It's because we are on the same floor, I believe, as you. I think that we're like 2 doors down.
Yeah.
Well, considering that when it comes to actually, I mean, I've not met Mike in IRL before, but I've met the Russ at San Diego Comic Con a couple of times, and the only way that we've been able to do that is literally try and schedule something and just say, okay, let's just arrange it, for God's sake, just for 10 minutes, because otherwise it really will be watching the pair. I mean, I have seen Mike going very quickly from A to B, and it's pinballing all over conventions, left, right, and center. So in that regard, I mean, what would you have been up to this summer, the pair of you, in terms of conventions? I mean, how busy was your calendar before everything kind of went sideways?
Mike?
I was really busy. The start of my year was action-packed. Heck, just can fly miles. I was way ahead of last year's pace. I usually fly like 150,000 miles a year, and I was actually at C2E2 just before everything kind of went to pot. And I remember thinking, I go, they're making efforts to kind of social distance, but by day 2, nobody was paying attention to it. Artist Alley was really packed. I remember talking about it with Tom King and Mitch Gerrits about it, and they were like really concerned about it. Mitch is kind of a germaphobe anyway. They were in surgical gloves so anyway, but it was really crowded. And I remember thinking, I go, conventions are just really hard / next to impossible to implement this kind of stuff. And C2E showed it to me. It's a big convention hall, much bigger and wider than the one in San Diego, and they couldn't make it work there with smaller crowds. And I remember thinking, how are conventions continue if they can figure out for a show like this, which is big, but not San Diego or New York Comic Con big? And then, of course, all hell broke loose, a week later, and I've been at home ever since.
Yeah, I had a similar thought about San Diego back when they were talking like we're going to make this happen. We're going to make this happen. I was wondering whether they would actually try to, and if they did, how they would choose who got to be the 30% that would attend, considering that you have this problem of selling out in 3 minutes and then trying to decide, like, okay, of the people that we sold out to, how the heck do we choose who gets to be the chosen one to actually show up? So I'm honestly, for some of these really big conventions, it's probably best when they close. Not even, I mean, yes, for the public health reasons, but even beyond that, there's a practicality level to not wanting to alienate 2/3 of your customers to please the other third.
Great point. Great point.
For me, I ever since comic books started to get big, my convention circuit has been really weird. I basically do San Diego and New York, and then I do a whole bunch of small shows around the Northeast where I can just jump in the car with my producer and go do a couple of on-camera interviews and a bunch of meet and greets. So really my big shows are San Diego and New York. And then outside of that, my other big, like the big things, honestly, that a bunch of us missed was those of us who cover TV didn't do any set visits this year. And I think it was a combination of things. Like all the CW shows usually happen in the fall. Obviously that wasn't COVID related, but it was Crisis. Because they couldn't spoil Crisis, and so they didn't want us on set the week after. Usually we go the week after the crossover shoots. And so then for anything that we would have done later in the season, it became impossible for them to try and schedule that, even if they wanted to, because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, that was the second to last thing I did was a set visit to a Marvel in late February. In Vancouver.
Did you see BD there? I think he was there.
No, it was really small. It was for Marvel's Hellstrom.
Oh, yeah.
And it was great. It's still embargoed, whatever, but that was literally right before C2E2. I remember when everything happened, I said, man, TV is going to be really impacted by this, because not just set visits, but right after San Diego is TCAs. And my Sci-Fi Wire colleague, Tara Bennett, covers that. And that's like a massive TV event, right? Everyone's there, and that's done. And one of the reasons I have nothing to talk about, no one's got any footage, because they have to shut down at the start of March. And that's going to be a big problem for the fall, because there's nothing in the can.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing in the can for the broadcast networks and a lot of the cable networks. So shows and Lego Masters and reunion shows where you see people doing interviews in their virtual studios at home, because they don't have any scripted programming on tape.
I recently spoke to Tom Kenny about he did a series. Him and Tara Strong did a bunch of PSAs for COVID for like kids to help them deal with this. And he was telling me that because the perception is like, oh yeah, animation, you guys can all work from home. And so they're working just their butts off. But you're going to have unions coming in and being like, dude, you can't do 3 people's job and not ask for a pay bump.
Bingo.
Because that's a bad precedent to set.
I'm really curious to see. I mean, I think Mike touched on it. What the landscape is going to look like for television going forward. I mean, we kind of were touching on it just before we went live in terms of what we can expect from productions, because here in the UK, we're obviously keeping a close eye on what Hollywood's up to. It's obviously a headline grabber. And we're starting to see a lot more news reports about the idea of how the studios have literally just shuttered the doors, and what we could be seeing once things kick back up again, and how that can even happen. I mean, what do you think, certainly for yourself, Russ, when it comes to scripted shows, when it comes to any kind of drama shows, social distancing is just going to really put a massive impact on how we're going to see cast and crew on a set. I mean, we've also seen some stuff here where, say, like some soaps are starting to start up here in the UK, and everyone's keeping a 2-meter distance, and everything is being very scripted to that end. That you're seeing a lot of 2 people in a scene from a distance, and it's going to be a lot more of that. Do you think we're going to see that across the board?
I think it'll depend on the show and the showrunner, because I do think that as regulations are relaxed, certain folks are going to be a little bit more cavalier. I do suspect it's going to be, I don't think anybody's just going to go off the reservation and make those decisions for the cast. I'm sure there'll be conversations. But when you look at somebody like Berlanti, he had said, he's, I think, the most prolific showrunner on television. Like, that's not an exaggeration. Even beyond the DC stuff, he has like 20 shows on the air right now. And he has said that he's not going to start production until, I think, October, and that once he does, there's going to be a ton of ways that they work around both the fight scenes and the romantic scenes to make it more social distancing friendly. But even then, it's really hard to picture how that works, because end of the day, you still need to be able to have fight scenes and love scenes in order for that sort of show to function. Somebody on Twitter, and I wish I could remember who, because I'd give him credit. When that announcement came out, somebody on Twitter joked, well, what's the CW going to do then? Because that's all that's 100% of their camera time.
Yeah.
So it's Riverdale, where everyone's making and having sex.
Yeah.
On Riverdale. How are you going to have those scenes with social distancing in place? It's not like you can force them to do it. You got to leave it up to the cast members, right? And and we're understandably concerned about keeping a certain distance. All of a sudden, Riverdale becomes a lot less salacious.
There's going to be a lot of romantic couples breaking up in these shows.
Riverdale did that already.
Pensive views from across the room.
Riverdale already did that, actually. All you got to do is get through the first couple of episodes of Riverdale to the time jump, and then like 5 years from now or whatever it is that they jump, you can just be like, yeah, none of them want anything to do with each other, and it solves your problem. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough to picture what it's gonna look like. And I mean, even going beyond kind of what we've already talked about in terms of what it looks like on screen, what do these things look like behind the scenes? Because when you have shows like, I'll take Supernatural, for example, they have on-set VFX because their VFX are such a huge part of their show. They have like a trailer there with like 7 people lined up doing VFX. And that's part of the reason that while some shows have been able to finish, Supernatural hasn't really, because all of their stuff was on site and they don't contract it all out. So when you have a show that takes dozens or hundreds of people to complete, where a lot of these shows with all the hair and makeup and the costumes, a lot of these superheroes need to be peeled out of their costumes literally. Yeah. So it's really difficult to social distance when you need 3 people to get you dressed.
Yeah. I'm also really curious. I mean, you guys will probably, and certainly yourself, Russ, will probably be able to help me out with the idea of what actually the lockdown. I mean, because we've skipped the whole thing. I was going to ask you about we've skipped about how you've been getting through the lockdown. We'll come back. We'll kind of ask how you've both been doing. But certainly with the productions, I mean, was it really a case of tools down and we're halfway through production of some shows? Whereabouts in the kind of like the time schedule for production, certainly for the summer and the fall kind of shows, whereabouts were we in production? Was it a case of production was literally just downing tools?
A little bit yes and a little bit no. Mike, you can correct me if you think this is any different. But like my understanding from and again, like primarily the Arrowverse shows are where I have a lot of inside information because I cover so much. They had a few days warning of like, look, this appears to be coming. I don't think it's avoidable. See what you can do. And so, in the case of Supergirl, they've been open about the fact that they modified the ending of the season, and they modified especially the ending of Lex's arc to accommodate the fact that, like, well, we don't want them to be hanging on a really unsatisfying cliffhanger for a year, potentially. So you did have a little bit of time, and people were able to rework a little bit of stuff, but it's not like you could say, okay, well, this is our last episode pre-COVID. Like, they didn't know at the start of production of whatever episode they were starting that they weren't going to be able to finish it correctly. And so I do think that there are some shows that that were able to complete episodes. I don't know of any show that felt, well, this whole episode's a waste and we're gonna have to reshoot it. It wouldn't surprise me if that happened. Certainly one of the things that really hurts the CW, and I imagine the timelines are similar for other networks too, like other broadcast networks that have basically the same scheduling system, is that they shoot their pilots in March so that they can present them at the upfronts in May, which means like Superman and Lois was 1 day from beginning production. Bitsy Tulloch was sharing script pages or whatever on not literally script pages, but her title page on the internet. And then it was like, no, we're not shooting anymore. And so when you get to the fall, not only are your favorite shows all delayed, but the new shows are starting at a huge disadvantage because they don't have all that time for people to look at the pilot, respond to it, and be like, oh, maybe we can tweak some stuff.
That's a great point. And they lose the promotional window of the summer cons.
Yeah.
Like San Diego's such a huge promotional platform for the new TV shows, right? Followed by TCA, which comes literally the weekend after. So you have production days, so the stuff isn't even shot. You lose your promotional window, which is why I remember it took so long for the San Diego folks to cancel the show. And I remember thinking, why are you waiting this long? Because there's no chance you're going to have anybody to promote because you're not going to have any footage. And you have the concerns about actors and their reps. They're not going to want to go down there and be in a potentially dangerous situation that exposes them possibly to COVID-19. So it's like it's a cascading window here, just one disaster after another piling on top as everything gets pushed back.
And a layer below all that, Mike, and one of the things that I haven't seen discussed very much, but it certainly affects Hollywood more than almost any other industry, is the insurance element. Because a lot of the time it's like, well, we're not going back to work until we know it's safe. And people are like, what the hell? You can't just be like the rest of us and put on a mask and do your thing. And it's like, honestly, no, because it can double or triple your cost of insurance, or it can make your show uninsurable. And if something goes wrong on a $200 million production and there's no insurance, the studio goes bankrupt.
Yep.
It's problematic. I'll tell you one show that it's probably going to benefit from this, because all their stuff is in the can, is the final season of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
Which debuts tonight. The fact that ABC for the last couple of seasons has shot all the episodes, had them done, and then ready, they can rip them off whenever. I think it's going to help them, because we're right about at that point. We're last week of May. There are no new programs that we can do unless they're buying them from another country and bringing them over. But in terms of stuff that they've got in pipeline, we're pretty much at the end of that.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we're going to see every kind of game show imaginable on the major networks. That's it. It's done. So I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., one, it's a great show, and I'm a big fan of it anyway. But I think it's going to benefit from the fact that people are looking for new programming in the genre space, and it's there, and you can binge, but get caught up. And I'm curious to see how the ratings do, because I can't imagine the ratings won't be substantially higher than they expected because of the unique situation they find themselves in.
Now, I'm really curious as to see, because I mean, people who enjoy pop culture, people who wanted to go out to see films, they recognize that there's just no films out there to see. I mean, I've got a couple of friends who are working in the cinema industry. They're talking about opening up with social distancing aspects in place, and they've got no films. They've got no product to put on the screens at all. And it's just there's this dearth of pop culture to enjoy. When it comes to television and stuff that we can enjoy on our screens here, streaming obviously is filling in a little bit of that void, but I'm wondering when people are going to suddenly realize just how much of this has impacted. I mean, you're talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and yeah, you're right. I'm looking forward to that coming out. But you're right. That is literally the only show that has had any kind of ability to close its production on any kind of note. When do you think people are going to suddenly realize that there's nothing out there?
Well, I will say just a minor correction, and this is not, but Legends of Tomorrow has their finale next week.
Oh, right, okay.
And they did the same thing that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They had a 15-episode season, so they were able to shoot, wrap, and they were in post already when the pandemic closed everything down. So you do have occasional shows, especially mid-season shows, where a lot of the time they shoot on the same schedule as everybody else, but then they just come out later. So like the CW has In the Dark and a bunch of stuff like that, that probably there will be a handful more episodes. I think that Mike is right. Like you get to the end of May, the beginning of June is when you really start to see that stuff dry up.
Wow. Yeah, that's a sobering thought. But you're
I will say, by the way, I forgot to say this, and it's worth mentioning. When I talked to Mark Guggenheim the other day, because he directed last night's Legends, he told me that he had written a pilot specifically that he hopes to direct, if he can, for that's designed to be shot with post-coronavirus social distancing things in place and all that kind of like. So I do think you're going to start seeing folks who are writing to the circumstance, whether it's writing shows that can be done remotely or writing shows that can be done with social distancing in place. And I don't think it's all going to be like the novelty stuff. Like you see a friend of mine, Olivia De Laurentiis, has a show on Snapchat that's literally, it's called Stir Crazy. It's about like friends who are stranded apart from each other because of COVID. And there's like 5 shows that are variations on that same theme right now that are like web shows. That's not going to work on TV. There might be one that works, but I don't know.
I think we've got no choice. I think we're going to see a lot. I mean, we've got the David Tennant show as well that's is going to be coming to the BBC pretty soon. I think we're going to see a lot of quite frankly, for myself, I've been getting sick and tired of the webcam quality and that slight tinniness of webcam audio. That's going to get really boring really quickly.
Yeah.
So
technical limitations of things like this are hard to stomach for 30 minutes and 1 hour. But you know, you're starting to see networks like ESPN do, and ABC's done it for some of their Disney sing-alongs. They've sent crews to set up mini studios And you can do that. Look, if you have some actors who have the benefit of a nice backyard,
Yeah.
do kind of like you could do variations on the Arrow documentary within an episode type format. You could get away with certain slice of life, moment in time type episodes like that program. But how do you maintain a whole season's worth, or even an arc across it? Because you're right, you have the technical limitations, you have the substandard sound, you have the obvious factor that people will recognize. Oh, hey, one person's in LA, the other one's in Vancouver. It's a challenge. The writers and producers like Guggenheim who can come up with ways to work around and within the limitations of this new normal. They're going to sell those. They're going to sell those ideas real quick because subtitle networks are looking for some things to buy to fill in the programming gaps.
And if folks are going back into production in the late summer or the fall, or with the knowledge that, a lot of people think that in November or something, we're going to get a second hit. Of course, they're going to want to buy shows that have built into them an escape hatch for that. So that if you have to pause production or halt production or send production remote, it doesn't terminate the show completely.
Right.
Especially for new shows, because if you get 2 episodes in and then disappear for a year and a half, unless you're like Superman and Lois, where people are already invested in the characters, who's going to remember some sitcom that they watched for 2 episodes?
Here's an idea that somebody should tackle because it's very easy to do with remote producing. I mean, it's about I believe it's the 40th anniversary of the superheroes roast. Find who's alive. Find who've been influenced by that and do where are they now? And let's talk about one of the worst TV specials ever, and let's make an hour program out of it. Come on, it's right there.
That would be great. I'd watch a lot of that. I honestly, one of the things that I'm deeply jealous of, Mike, is that you guys do those great long form video works. I constantly am pitching my bosses like, hey, I want to do this hour-long like mini documentary on some esoteric thing about comics, and they're just like, I don't think any of our audience would like it.
Excuse me, I was the guy that took the and Mike knows about this. I was the guy that took the Image Comics thing he did for Sci-Fi and edited it myself into an hour documentary on my own edit thing. I was interested in it, and I'm up for it. So
I'm happy you did that.
I watched that with my father-in-law at one point because my in-laws are kind of interested in what I do in a very general way. Like they think it's fascinating, but they don't get any of it. It's not something they've ever cared about prior to meeting me. And so I felt that was a really great, really digestible, really accessible thing for people who didn't necessarily know a lot about comics to be able to get a lot of necessary information.
They dug it. They were.
Yeah, he liked it. He. It's funny because the people who come off on camera, if you already know people's personalities, you'll have one impression of them. Everybody watching it who didn't know anything about comics were like, that Rob Liefeld, he seems just like a barrel of laughs. and I personally love Rob, and I have nothing bad to say about him, but I do think that people who are in the comics community would watch that and be like, yeah, Rob's totally on brand and not.
I love Rob too. I don't think he feels the same way about me for whatever reason.
Same here.
But I love Rob, and I think he's a great spokesperson. Actually, it's funny that those guys, the young rebels of comics, 3 of those guys in particular, were most outgoing and the ones with the highest profile. Jim Lee, Todd, and Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld are really the modern generation of the successors to Stan Lee as the ambassadors of comics, because they're still in the business, they still love the business, and they carry a lot of weight in different ways, but they still carry a lot of influence, and they still love the business. And I think it's more important than ever that they carry that mantle right now, because the business is in trouble. There's a big shakeout happening now that it's going to take a while to settle in and find its groove. But comics at the other end of this is going to look very, very different. Very, very different.
Go on.
I feel bad for Jim because if there was ever, and again, I'm not going to get into the politics of it or whatever, whether you like him or not, but if there was ever a worse time to fire Dan DiDio, I can't imagine what it would have been. Because he did provide stability, if nothing else. And I think that right now there's a lot of weight on Jim's shoulders, because the guy who he used to turn to be like, how do we spin this and make it like, because Jim was always the face and Dan was always the guy with 15 ideas, you know? And
Dan was really the guy in the weeds of
yeah.
But I mean, look, Jim's hand is probably falling off now as he does. I think he's like 45 or 46.
Don't.
But I mean, that guy's raised $800,000 through his efforts for comic book stores, man. Every night he's doing this stuff.
I've tweeted it enough times. It's when he first started them. He said, I'm just going to do them half an hour. They're going to be sketches, which I'm going to just put together. And it's just going to be something I'm going to hopefully raise some money with. Sketches. And the tweets I've been putting out is basically retweeting him and going, sketches. Remember that word. And it's just these full-blown pieces.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's
I had a conversation with McFarlane right after that stuff started, because, you know, we have a documentary that Sci-Fi is going to debut this summer. We wanted to make a big splash about it at San Diego Comic. Obviously, that's not possible, but we're going to debut it at some point this summer on the network. I produced it for them, and I was talking to Todd about, you know, some things that we're talking about and how to promote it and whatnot. And I at some point we diverged to talking about Jim and the sketches, and I told him, I go, you know, I know how much you love the business, and I know you feel a certain responsibility to carry your weight. And he's like, yeah, you know, I've always said I'm never going to draw Spider-Man again, because it's like a guy who graduated from high school. Why would he go back to high school? You know, he has no interest in ever doing that. But he goes, the industry kind of needs big guns to kind of do things. So I'm thinking about ways to do it. And I stopped him and I said, here's an idea that'll save comics right now, because it'll sell 1 million copies. You and Jim get together, pick any writer you want. I don't care who it is. One of us could write it. It's not going to make a difference. You and Todd, you and Jim Lee doing artwork for a Batman versus Spawn book. I go, you do that. Do a 3-issue miniseries, slugfest, splash pages galore. Like I said, pick anybody you want to write it. It'll sell 1 million copies. You'll get fans back in the store, and you have the event that the industry needs. And usually when I've thrown crazy ideas like this out at him during my conversations with Todd, he laughs and he says, no. Todd loves to say no. He's really good at it. Yeah. But this one, he stopped and says, what a bad idea. And that's it. He wouldn't bring it up. That's it. He changed the subject. We moved on. But he did, you know, and, you know, he's back working with DC in a way with the toys.
Yeah.
Which, you know, some of those boxes are going to feature McFarlane artwork on DC characters for the first time in like 30-something years.
Since Invasion? Yeah.
And him and Jim are pals, and they talk and they text all the time. I'm telling you, I think we're going to hear something about that down the road, because these two guys know that comics needs a big thing. They need a GLA Avengers. They need something like that, right? And they know, it's funny, they know their place in the business, and they know they carry a lot of weight with fans, and they know their work can bring in they can bring in fans, even the casual and lapsed fans who haven't been in comic books. But you put out a banner that says Todd McFarlane, you know, Jim Lee, Batman, Spawn, fill in the name writer, but make a big name writer, get a Aaron, get a Brian Bendis, whoever you want. I'm telling you, that's an event.
Sure. Yeah. I was going to talk about the comics industry, about what we're going to see at the end of the pandemic and when we come back to some kind of normality. But we might as well talk about how they dealt with the pandemic themselves and during this period. I mean, between the pair of you, who do you think has held their own? Who's done their best throughout this pandemic, not only in terms of keeping people engaged, on online products as well, lots of streaming stuff going out. I mean, we talk about the streaming wars and the amount of content that we take on board. The amount of YouTube content that I have been taking on board while this has been going on, comics talent just kind of streaming left, right, and center, live streams, Instagram stuff, left, right, and center. It's just been insane. Who would you say has come out best throughout this entire model?
The big two have done well in different ways. I think Marvel's done a lot of digital content well. They do a lot of social media content very well. I think Marvel's social media and digital team is really on point. really good. DC overall, I think, probably done the best. I mean, they have the apparatus in place for it. They kept DC Daily going. The producers on that show and the hosts really scrambled and were very quickly doing things from home. I have a couple of friends on that show, and I remember being very happy for them that they were able to continue work. People like, Clark Wolf and Hector Navarro, they were able to continue to do stuff. And they did really clever things that fit not just with DC Comics, but across the entire DC media platform. And they kept the comics out there with the digital releases. Marvel, somewhere Marvel decided not to put out any comics, but I like that as well because it would show some support for the comic shops. By doing that, I don't know. I think that question wants to see which stop going into the stores, because what I'm worried about are the fans who take the 2.5 months that we've been under as a way to break the habit and the cycle of the weekly trips to the new comic day. I stopped that a while ago. Like, I went to the store into my shop in Miami, usually Thursday or Friday or Saturday, just because I get a lot of comics and reviews and just to keep up on things. But I like to go in and support the shop and do it. But I don't really buy a lot of floppies much. Out of the big two, I buy main trades. The floppies that I buy usually from smaller publishers because I feel they need that money more. But I think have broken that cycle. Now I'm worried about it. Are they going to get back into that routine? Because unfortunately, the comic shops are dependent on that weekly traffic for the single issues. And I'm hoping the positive things that come out of this is that the publishers, big and small, realize they've got to move away from that. There's no future in that. Issue is dwindling. It's not growing. The younger readers that the comic book publishers need to find to survive into graphic novels, meteor stories for not much more than a special edition DC or Marvel comic.
Yeah.
So I guess there's this fun into reading graphic novels, and she's reading some of the YA versions of the DC heroes, things like that, and the Telgemeier books and things like that. And I think that's where the business is moving. And for the longest time, the comic book publishers couldn't break the cycle. They got people to, and I certainly don't want to cost any writers or artists or inkers any money. So it's a cycle that they couldn't get out of. And for 2 months, a lot of, be pent down. And I'm hoping that the people at the top of some of these publishers have taken this time to think about ways to really move the industry forward and to find a different way to keep the industry alive. I know at least one small publisher that's told me, and they're going to announce it soon, they're moving away from the single issue format, and they're going to move to webtoons and digital, and they're going to publish their titles as a print collection at the end, but they're done with single issues. That's going to be announced soon. And I think that's something that other publishers with smaller margins are going to really consider doing, because frankly, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense.
What's
go on.
What's interesting to me is immediately, maybe a week prior to the pandemic, I had been outlining what I was going to write, like 3 or 4 stories on kind of the state of comics and where we needed to be in order to be salvageable, because things have been margins have been razor thin for both publishers and retailers for so long, and the audience is shrinking. And every time the publishers try to make a change that's going to be a good long-term change to benefit the industry, retailers revolt, and the publishers more often than not retreat, because they need the retailers and they can't afford the short-term hit that alienating those retailers costs them. And one of the things, the reason that I think DC has done really well in the pandemic is not just in terms of like digital content and things, but they seem to be very much focused on the long-term health of the company and the industry. And, this idea that they're looking outside of Diamond for distribution so that if this happens again, people can still have
huge
comics.
decision. That's a huge decision that they made there.
And I understand a lot of smaller publishers are locked into exclusive deals with Diamond and don't have that luxury. But I do think that if DC and Marvel set a standard, then the standard becomes industry-wide pretty quick. Yeah. And so I think that that's one of the things I've really admired. And I know that it did upset some retailers and obviously upset Diamond. But I do think that DC seems to have their eye on a ball that isn't just a pitch at the knuckles. Like they seem to really be paying attention to not just surviving this fiscal year, but like how are comics going to roll with this punch? Because this is going to affect everybody bottom line wise for like 3 years. And I think if you're looking at how to get out of the next 6 months, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. And that's one of the things that I've really been impressed with is that DC, in spite of, like I said, having kind of a management vacuum because they let go their most stable figure right before it all happened, really seemed to have a sense for this is what we need to do to survive this in the long term.
I found it interesting that the big two, when the actual pandemic hit, and we both all remember it just happened so fast. I mean, the world just kind of crawled to a stop on a dime. It was just happened so very quick, so very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. It was the independents that really kind of stepped up and made some big statements about how they were going to service their audience best. IDW, Dark Horse, Boom, etc. They came out and they made those big announcements about what they needed to do to stay connected to their audience. It's a shame then that someone that we've been featuring a lot on this show when we've had guests on IDW, that they had that strong model that they said that they're going to roll out the books post-pandemic and have the really strong titles that would allow them to get back into the game once things started getting back to the new normal. And then last week we had the word that they were letting go of a large number of their mid-level staff, which really it made my support of some independent publishers really difficult, because you realize that they may come out and make these really strong statements to connect with their audience, but then they're going to struggle just keep staying alive.
When the money runs out, all the greatest plans, go out the window. I mean, sure. It's been devastating, and there are such small margins in comics on both sides. Yeah. For the smaller publishers and for the retailers, as Russ mentioned. I mean, look, until comic retailers are able to return unsold, have some kind of return policy for unsold single issues, comic shops are always going to be on the precipice of disaster. And then what happened? We just had a disaster. We're in the middle of the disaster, right? So, I mean, no matter how much money DC and Jim Lee, in his tireless efforts raised, it's still not going to be enough to save some comic shops. So unfortunately, at the end of this, there's going to be hundreds of stories that never reopen. Yeah. And it stinks because those are not going to be replaced by, there's not going to be the same number of stories coming around and filling those places. So the comic publishers have to think about where else can we replace that income? Where can we continue to service the audience? Where can we continue to build an audience? And it's got to be in the bookstores.
I think so.
When I go to bookstores, and there's fewer bookstores out there than I'd like, but when I do go into them, when I go there to shamelessly look and see if one of my books is there so I can scribble on it and put it back there for the one person that might buy it, I look around and I see in the graphic novel section, I see a lot of kids there. Now, they're not looking for single issues. They're looking, and they're not even looking at the Marvel and DC trade paperbacks. They're looking at a lot of the independent ones and a lot of humor books. But that's what they're looking at. And that's where the future of the comics industry is.
Mm. Mike, I think it's funny because the thing you said there, which I think bears repeating, is something that I've found myself saying to people 2 or 3 times throughout all this. And you said it exactly perfectly. We have known for years that we were one disaster away from everything collapsing. And now we've been hit with a disaster, and not just a disaster, but a sustained disaster that's going month after month after month.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm also looking through a couple of comments. Thank you very much indeed to everyone who's getting comments in. I mean, there's Into the Blue Mister. I'm going to return to this one. The older I get, the more I'm veering towards collections rather than single issues. They look better on the shelf, but I still feel I'm cheating on copies, on floppies. I've been going through all my floppies. I'm sorry, but I am a floppies guy. I mean, just to talking about DC and their model and what they've been saying. When they had their statement coming out, especially when they came to their statements regarding distribution, about looking at other distribution avenues to get books into the stores,
Right.
The way that they worded that statement, it was a case of, yes, we have our the alternative models, the digital models, the way to continue and look beyond, but they almost look at the floppies as a separate business avenue. It's something that they still want to maintain because there are the collectors out there. There are those.
Well, I can tell you this, DC's extensive research into this, and I heard this from Jim and several other people there. Everything that they've researched tells them the audience for digital is completely different than the audience for the print, floppies, and collections. All their research that they've been doing for years, and Jim was at the forefront of pushing for digital when he became co-publisher of DC. That was what he was really focused on. Everything they've seen in the decade since has shown them that they're completely different audiences, which surprised me, but in a way, I guess it shouldn't, because there are some people that have grown up digitally. I would imagine the younger audience is probably much more amenable to digital comics and webtoons than old farts like me who like the smell of a print comic and hold it in their hands. But look, it's just, the older you get, we all run out of space. Although apparently Russ hasn't, because he looks like he has an endless amount of space there in his fortress of solitude there.
Well, the nice thing about we live with my in-laws. We're going to buy this house when they move, and they had many children, and so I have a fairly large home office, and I have, as you see, filled every inch of it with stuff.
Very nice.
This back here is like my Arrowverse wall primarily. The one directly opposite me is a Josie and the Pussycats movie.
Nice. I know you're a big fan. By the way, did you steal that garbage can over your shoulder from a CW show? Because it's prominently placed.
That's just a garbage.
Well, I mean, we had Into the Blue Mister at the top of the show saying Mike gets nerd points for the spinner, Russ gets nerd points for the statues, everyone's a winner. So yeah, we have them paying attention to our guests and what they have in the background.
If we're talking about The Office, I should show you guys this because I love it. Hold on.
Go for it.
So this is Bebo.
Hey!
Nice.
This was made for me by Jenna Anderson, who's one of my coworkers at comicbook.com. It was a part of, like, we did a little, each of us independently, because we all think exactly the same, decided to send each other Legends of Tomorrow themed Christmas boxes 2 years ago.
That is awesome.
And so it lives with all my statues over there. Usually I don't put it right on the statue's shoulders because you don't want to knock them over, but I put it up there just so that the camera might catch it.
Very nice.
The two plushes I have are him, and then you can, if I turn the other way, you can see Mr. Glum, the red guy from Savage Dragon back there. And I should I should say, because I've been writing about Savage Dragon a lot. I've been doing that commentary track with Eric for every issue since 150. And so I should say that I have no responsibility for the number of times that everybody has said floppies in this issue. Eric hates it.
He's very particular. I've only interviewed him a couple of times. He's very particular, but I love the guy, not just for Savage Dragon, but because he's also a huge comic art collector.
Yeah.
He's got one of the best collections out there in private hands.
When they did the comic book kayfabe interview with him a few months ago, obviously it wasn't video, but they were doing the interview via Skype or something, and so they had a video. And there was like a 3-minute derailment of the interview so that Eric could like point over his shoulder at the giant stacks of original art that he has on wire racks. It's like entire issues of Commandi and stuff like that.
Oh, he's got one. I believe he may have the second biggest Kirby original art collection on the planet.
That would not surprise me.
It's an incredible amount of Kirby art. Like, yeah, he's a fan of the medium. I mean, look, this is a guy who could be doing a lot of other things, making a lot more money, and he chooses to do his book, his way, which I think he does like almost everything on the book except lettering it.
Yeah, he does.
Crazy.
Occasionally he will letter or color it, but those are very rare situations. Usually he has a letterer and a colorist.
No, it's crazy.
And technically we have an editor. Technically he has an editor now, Gavin Higginbotham, who for years ran the Savage Dragon wiki, is now nominally Eric's editor. And basically Gavin's job is that Eric will call him up and be like, hey, is this guy dead yet? Because Eric kills so many characters that he just forgets who is and is not alive. And he'll call up Gavin and just be like, you know this book better than I do at this point. Can I use this person?
Incredible. Right, to get back to a couple of comments, a couple of things that I wanted to get into, and certainly when it comes to comicbook.com as well, with the way that they've been wanting to do digital media and commentary online, and you were talking about cartoon kayfabe there as well. What kind of stuff have the pair of you two been paying attention to in terms of live streams and podcasts and things? And obviously, you've still got stuff to do. You've still got writing to do, and you've still got to occupy your time. But I'm certain there's downtime. What have you been kind of been looking into, and what you've been watching? Because there's a couple of podcasts that I've been watching. The original Drink and Draw Social is still my fixture on Thursday. I bloody love that show. And I have been trying to watch the Morning Joe as well. But I mean, what's the ones that have been catching your attention?
Mike, do you want to start or should I?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, Drink and Draw is a favorite of mine. What's the podcast I've been listening to? I mean, I've been listening to the Galacticast, since day one anyway, with Mark Bernardin and Tricia Helfer. In terms of comics, I really haven't added a new one. I don't really listen to a lot of comic book podcasts, to be honest, because the time that I have to research and do this stuff, I got to read the comics that I want to write about. And I always tell this to people. I go, I spend so much time writing about, but I read fewer comics now than ever because I'm too damn busy. So the pandemic has actually given me a chance to catch up on things, whether it's some classic books that I've missed over the years that I want to jump on, and some newer titles. In terms of videos, I've been watching a lot of interview shows because I always like to try to improve my interview skills. Josh Horowitz, who's a buddy of mine at MTV, to me, he's one of the best interviewers in the business, genre or otherwise, and he's got a great interview series because he's really good at making people feel comfortable and getting to really relax themselves and say really stupid shit on the air. So I enjoy his a lot. I don't do a lot of live Twitter commentary or watch-alongs. I have been following your pal Brandon Davis's quarantine parties because those are really great. He's got some great guests who are really taking part in it and really participating as opposed to just sending out one tweet every 10 minutes, So that's been fun. The funny thing is I've been doing that without watching the movies because I usually don't start and my kids are still awake. So it's like, I can't put on Avengers Endgame because my kids would rather watch Vampirina or Rocketeer. So I just follow along the tweets and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm
in the UK. It's usually about 3 o'clock in the morning when those things are going off. I can't watch them.
It's
you can follow Mark Miller's.
I had that conversation.
Mark Miller's.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's been doing it on Friday nights.
I had that conversation with a couple of our my regular interactions on Twitter. I did because actually BD started those, but then once comic book became more involved, he started trying to get other people. He's like, by all means, I don't own this thing, man. You guys jump in here, do one. And mostly it's just been Brandon. Our wrestling team I think, did one, and our anime team did one, and then I did 2 in a row. And one of the people I interact with really regularly was super excited that we were doing one for Josie and the Pussycats. And we got Deb and Harry to do it, and Kay Hanley popped in, who was the singing voice of Josie and stuff. But she was in, I can't remember where in Europe, but she was somewhere in Europe, and she was like, it's 5 a.m. right now. There's just no way. And similarly, Brendan Connolly, who used to write for Bleeding Cool and then wrote for us a little bit. When I did the Kevin Smith, we did a double feature of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and Reboot. And he was just like, man, I really would love to chime in I got to go to bed because he is in the UK. And so I was like, I'll tell you what, go on TweetDeck, like plug in like 1 or 2 comments just so I can say I got you involved.
Nice. You know, I love that movie, and I love the fact that you're a huge fan of it too. I'll go ahead and say best soundtrack of the last 25 years. And frankly, nobody should argue that point.
I have the Mondo version signed on my Josie wall over there.
That soundtrack has been part of my iTunes library since the movie. I mean, since I had my first iPod, I think. Just a great
finally
soundtrack.
Came out digitally, like officially, like a year ago or something, and I was like, "Oh, good! I don't have to carry these waves around from 1999."
And the songs still hold up. You listen to that soundtrack now, and they still hold up. Just absolutely great songs from start to finish.
I'm still waiting for some tweet-alongs of films which are completely off the beaten track. Where I'm still waiting for my Presidio tweet-along. I keep waiting for someone to do. You know what I mean? Those films where you just go, really? You really want to spend a couple of hours talking about that? Okay, that's what I'm wanting more of.
I've got some, honestly. I've got a couple of them, and in some cases, I've already reached out to Cast about it, just to be like, would you do this with me if I could figure out a way to do it that wasn't hijacking comic books? Because the big problem is I don't want to get anybody in trouble at work by being like, no, let's talk about this wacky R-rated political movie, or talk about this 80s movie that most people have forgotten, and do it on the company dime and do it while I'm on the clock.
I'm stunned nobody's done The Rocketeer yet.
I love The Rocketeer.
I can't say for sure, but I think that Brandon had reached out to some of the folks involved in The Rocketeer, and either it just hasn't happened or they weren't interested, one of the two. A lot of the things that he's reached out with, it's not that people have said no. It's just that they haven't happened yet, in terms of like people are like, oh, that'd be cool. Let me talk about it in about 2 weeks and figure it out. So there's always like a backlog of stuff where it's like, yeah, we have 1 of these a week, 2 of these a week, but there's always 7.
A great one.
Huh?
The Rocketeer is a great choice. I'm old enough to remember seeing that in the theaters and coming out wondering, why isn't this a bigger hit? Why isn't this a bigger hit?
As a kid, I wasn't aware that it wasn't a bigger hit because, I saw it and loved it in year 9 or whatever I was. And so it was just like, you just assume everybody loves it because you did. It's like Bill and Ted. I assumed it was the biggest movie of all time.
I hadn't watched it in years, but my youngest daughter, who's almost 7, started watching the Rocketeer cartoon on Disney Junior, which is in universe. It takes place in the world of the Rocketeer movie, almost like a years in the future sequel, right? But for little kids, and they do a great job. And Billy Campbell's one of the voices in it. He occasionally pops in as the dad of the main character. And so I said, okay, girls, you know what? We got to watch the original Rocketeer. And my youngest always says, I don't want to watch the movie. I don't want to watch the movie. And then without fail, she loves the movies that I choose. I do a really good job of choosing, but she always hates it before she watches it. Halfway through the movie, she was totally into it because she remembered the costume, because it's the original Rocketeer. There's a statue of him in the new cartoon. So the moment he comes on screen, boom, her eyes lit up, and she was totally into it. But her favorite scene was the one in the ballroom where he goes crashing through everything. That's it. Once that scene happened, my kids were all in.
It's funny. The
pilot
for that animated show had a scene at the fairgrounds or whatever, but it was they very clearly like storyboarded it to emulate that scene at the airstrip from the movie. And so I started watching it with my daughter, and I saw what they were doing, and I just pulled up the other one on YouTube. And that's how I convinced her to watch the movie, was just showing her, like, look, this is what they're doing. Which is, I found that the more I try to tell my kids, no, this is great, you're going to love it, the more they don't listen to that. So if I can, like, back them into something, my youngest, I was playing like a mix CD called The Green Album a while back, which is like pop stars from about 10 years ago covering Muppet songs.
Muppet songs, yeah, I know, I got that album.
And there's a version of Phenomena by The Fray, and my 5-year-old loved it. And so I showed her Phenomena from The Muppet Show, and that allowed me to like back her into watching The Muppets.
The Muppets I've had no problem getting them to see, but yeah, parenting, it's a shell game. It's all it's all about confusing them and sleight of hand. That's all you can do.
Marriages as well. Wives, you similar tricks with wives. Listen, I was going to talk to you guys for about 40 minutes, and then we could just keep going for hours. I mean, it's great that we're covering so much, but we'll let you get off and do the rest of your day. But we'll just finish on a couple of things, because obviously this is a Comic-Con related show, so we'll kind of come back to this one in terms of what we can expect from conventions. We kind of touched on the way that we could be seeing. I mean, we saw that promotion window is the way that Mike put it earlier, and how we've lost that this year. But the one thing I'm curious about is whether the studios and the various entities have maybe realized that maybe the promotion is not necessarily essential this year at conventions, purely because the conventions haven't been there and they've had to find other ways to get the word out. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on studios and companies coming back to conventions, how that could even look. I mean, what the conventions could even look like, either at the back end of this year or even next year.
I think that's a really interesting question, because I think that we started to see over the last couple of years a handful more studios already questioning, like, is it worth all of the money and all of the headaches to get to Comic-Con in some instances? We've seen people who have started taking every other year off, or taking any year off that they don't have a major thing they have to promote for the summer or something. And so I think it's going to be a crapshoot. I think there's going to be a fair number of people who really want to get back to what they feel is normal. And I think that Comic-Con will be a great way to help do that.
I mean, could it even be a case of there could be an absolute snap back that, okay, no, we actually need to get people's eyeballs onto the stuff that we've got next year?
Ironically,
considering the amount of backlog we're going to have of all of the films and shows that we're going to have next year.
I think that's an interesting. I think that film-wise, I think you're very right. I think there's going to be a lot more. Like, there's going to be so much congestion, especially because 2021 was already loaded for bear before all of this happened.
Sure.
But I think TV is going to be almost the opposite thing, because they're all starting production later than usual, and because everybody's watching TV all the time. I almost feel like you need less publicity for TV right now, because people are going to be desperate for content, and when new stuff starts hitting, you can just run trailers on your own network and on the internet, and it's going to get you the same bang that you would get having a Comic-Con panel in some cases. Obviously not all cases, because sometimes you really benefit from that enthusiasm. But I think for shows that are borderline, that aren't necessarily comic book shows, but they're like, oh yeah, we'll do a Comic-Con panel. That's a cool thing to do. I think some of those are gonna bail, because it'll just be like, we don't need to spend that money when we know people are desperate for new content.
I mean, I'll start my comments by saying, one, I don't expect to see a notable comic convention before the end of 2020. You might see some outlier shows like the Tampa Con that I know they're going to do in July, which I think is a terrible idea. But outside of small shows.
Very quickly then, between the pair of you, thumbs up, thumbs down, New York Comic Con?
I don't see any way that they can do it, unfortunately.
No,
I mean, they're even if we had gotten to the point by then that it seemed like a plausible idea, you would have to deal with the fact that the Javits has been ground zero for the center of the epidemic in the United States for the last 3 months. I just, there's
October
no
in New York, when you might see the second wave. If you're a talent rep, if you're a studio executive who has to worry about liability for your cast and crew, that could then jeopardize production for a 3-day trip to New York to go publicize a show that's going to be just starting back in production. The risks far outweigh the reward. There's no chance New York Comic Con is happening. No chance.
No, I'm not sure why they have waited so long to say as much, because I think that Governor Cuomo, and I live in New York, not the city, I live upstate, but I think that Governor Cuomo has been very vocal about how cautious he plans to be in transitioning us back to normal, because the city has been so hard hit.
Right.
I think it's something we're going to. I'm going to talk at the back end of the show, especially about London Film and Comic Con. I think it's more of an insurance thing. If they announce now, there's going to be a lot of costs incurred when it comes to
I think you're right.
cancellations. Yeah,
insurance plays into that. Look, I think when we get out of this and we start seeing conventions again, I think it's going to be accelerated by the actors who depend on the revenue from cons and the meet and greets. You know, that's become an ancillary revenue stream for a lot of television actors in particular, because they realized, wow, I can make a lot of money by just interacting with my fans and giving them a cool experience. You know, guys like Stephen Amell really pioneered this, the Walking Dead actors in particular. I mean,
I talked to Mike Rowe last week.
Reedus is probably the originator of the convention as a retirement plan strategy for TV actors. And it's great because, honestly, it's a win-win. Fans will happy to pay to interact with actors who then make an effort to give them a unique experience, right? So I think a lot of those actors who depend on that extra revenue are going to be anxious to get back to it, as long as convention organizers create certain protocols that provide a sense of comfort and safety. Yeah. Once those protocols are put in place and you convince the actors to go to, then you're going to see conventions come back. Now, in terms of big shows like New York and San Diego, I think we need to look at March and WonderCon as maybe the first of those big shows. I think even February is probably too soon because it's still winter, and you know, who knows when this second wave may come back. I think spring of 2021 is when I think you're going to want to really look forward to seeing a big multimedia con. You know, with TV actors, some movie studios promoting a big film, and the usual comic book and gamers and anime folks.
Yeah.
How eager are you two going to be to get back?
I'm sorry?
How eager are you two going to be to get back?
I'm dying to go back to shows because, I mean, it's part of my job. But one, I don't think Sci-Fi is going to want to send any of their employees to any shows anytime soon because of, you know, insurance and safety concerns. I'm dying to go back to it, but I don't want to go earlier than necessary. Because while I'm not super paranoid or super worried about it, I'm relatively healthy, knock on wood, and I take care of myself and whatnot. You have no control over what other people are doing. And man, think about the petri dish that conventions are anyway.
Yeah.
Now you throw this in, and the lack. I mean, I'm trying to think of which convention outside of C2E2, which was right before the pandemic really exploded. I can't remember any other con that had hand sanitizer all over the place and made it easy to wash away the germs. So it's like, you know, most of these convention spaces have too few bathrooms, too many people, and not enough common sense to create social distance anyway. So all of a sudden we're going to expect them to do this like that. Remember, most of those conventions are staffed by volunteers. You can't realistically expect them to do these kind of changes overnight, and that's basically what we're asking them to do. So yeah, to answer your question in a long-winded way, I'm fine waiting until 2021 to go back to a convention.
I'll piggyback onto that and say it's not just the volunteers either; it's the audience, because fans who spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the thing that's supposed to be the highlight of their year don't want to have to pass on such and such an opportunity because they can't safely stay 6 feet away from the guy in front of them in line.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's going to be really tough implementing any kind of meaningful social distancing at the bigger conventions. And I think you're right. I think that probably WonderCon and C2E2 are going to be the two places where we start to see, like, this is the model. This is how we try to do this, and how does it break down and how does it work? There will be, as you said, and there already are, a handful scheduled of other shows. I know that there's a guy locally here in Syracuse who was messaging me the other day to say, even if only a handful of people show up, I think it's important for smaller shows to have the show so that people know that we didn't go out of business because of COVID. And I understand. I don't know that I agree with him, but I certainly understand that philosophy. Yeah. And
people have to work. People have to work, and people have to earn a living.
I'm in a red part of New York State. There's a lot of people in my area who don't take it seriously because politically it's become a football. And so I'm playing this very, very safe. My father-in-law, who, as I said, we live in the same house, and he is a high-risk person. He has like an arthritis medication that makes him immunocompromised. And so we have been leaving very, very infrequently, and we've been, you know, taking it as seriously as we can. If I go out to like replace the fan that blew a fuse, it's a 10-minute trip to the store, but I have not just gloves, but not just a mask, but gloves and everything else. And I'll carry bleach wipes so that I can wipe down any surface I'm touching, because like it's the combination of like having a high risk person in your household and living in a place where, you know, people are not taking it seriously. And so I'm very much with Mike. It's like I would love to get back to shows, and I am eager to get back to quote unquote normal. But I would rather wait an extra couple of months and do it right than half-ass it and have it become a catastrophe.
I mean, there's something that came up on a previous episode. I believe it was the Jimmy Palmiotti one, where he got into this conversation. It might have even been Dirk Wood, actually, because we were talking about how shows could look coming down the line. And he basically turned around and said, and it was him and Scott W., and they turned around and said, basically, all of the legacy guys, all of the, certainly in the comic industry, that you would like to see in their twilight years, the ones that before they do fully retire, they're not going to want to come back to shows. They're not going to want to put themselves in risk.
Sure.
So anyone in the kind of like 50-year plus range, you're not going to see at shows anymore.
And also, I would add to that a lot of folks who aren't dependent on this for their living, like the people who are famous in the space and who have money saved up, they don't need to be there. They want to be there. They want to be part of it. They want to be there with fans. But if they judge that it's not safe for them or their loved ones, they aren't going to go just for an extra couple of bucks in the experience. You know, so you not only do you have the seniors who are not going to want to be there, but also you have a lot of the folks who maybe aren't seniors, but they have enough money that they can say, maybe next year. Yeah. And I think that it's not an unreasonable thing for talent to err on the side of caution, especially because these are events where people come from all over the country and all over the world. And, you know, if you're saying like, well, I'm in New York State and we take it super seriously and we're got hand sanitizer every 6 feet and blah, 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 so I'm going to be fine. Like, that's not true if you're standing in line next to somebody who this morning was somewhere else where the rules are a lot more relaxed.
Yeah, it's true. And it's a great point about, you know, the old guard of creators. They're not going to want to go and risk their health. I mean, you know, guys, you know, and there's a lot of comic book folks who I'd love to see at shows and talk with, you know, who are in the 70 plus range. They won't be going, and frankly, they shouldn't be going to shows until until we get a vaccine out there in the atmosphere and for people to readily access. So until that happens, I think you're going to see conventions really have to adjust their model, you know, their business plans and models and floor plans and everything else to kind of adjust to things.
I will say to this tweet below us, or the comment, below us, I think that there are going to be outliers, and I think Steranko is a great example. I'm sure Steranko is the sort of guy, and I don't know him personally, so I can't say I'm sure, but I feel from his public persona that Steranko is the sort of guy who'd just be like, hell with it, I can do this. Yeah. You'll have those people, and those people aren't wrong either. Like if you think like this isn't something I'm worried about, I want to go make a living, like I understand that completely. But there's going to be a lot of people who don't agree with you, both on the customer side and on the creative side. And I don't know for mid-sized conventions, like I think for smaller conventions where your margins are bigger because you're not spending that much money, you'll be okay. And for the bigger conventions, you probably could make it work with corporate sponsorships. But like mid-sized conventions that really need turnout, it's like if you can't count on 35% of your audience showing up and you can't count on big name guests to compel them to show up, I don't know how you make it viable. Yeah.
I'm just really hoping that we're not, I mean, one way that they could do a big enough show where they have enough content coming is to stream it in through interviews like this onto a big screen. I really wouldn't want that to be the next model when it comes to a comic convention. That would just not be my idea of fun, quite frankly.
I don't think that's likely, simply because, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's people who are really into this, but like for me, the crowds themselves are
That's the
not
show.
that it's, but the crowds themselves aren't what I turn out for, obviously.
Oh, right.
I mean, for me, it's like I turn out for interactions with people who I want to meet, whether
Sure.
it's fans that I personally know or creators that I want to, and so I think there's enough people who, if it's virtual, why don't I do it from home?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that you can put on a show where it's like, no, let's pile 30,000 people into Hall H to watch Kevin Smith talk from his living room. It's like, no, we do that all the time. So
be careful. There's a peak that I'm certain that is on the cards.
Yeah, it's possible. And I mean, again, like it's entirely possible you'll see one or two panels like that at some big shows where it's like somebody they really want just absolutely refuses to come out, given the circumstances, and it's like, screw it, you know what? For you, we'll make that exception, but I don't think that's going to become the normal. I don't think there's enough interest to support it.
Fair enough. Listen, guys, I'm going to let you get off and enjoy the rest of your day. I mean, like I say, if we could do another one of these down the line and get you both back, because I mean, we've touched on literally about a third of what I kind of put down on a note, because I mean, I wanted to get into the whole streaming services and who has won that particular battle, and if they listen, we could have carried on going for ages. But
can I just say, to that point, I nothing makes me happier than the fact that last night Legends of Tomorrow did an episode of television about how the bad guys were using a streaming service to indoctrinate the masses into compliance. And then 4 hours later, the parent company of Warner Brothers Television released their own streaming service.
Yeah.
There was that. Bit of timing.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's other things that I wanted to get into as well. Let's put it this way. We haven't said the word Snyder Cut once yet. So we could either... look at Mike's face. Oh, dear Lord.
Here's my one sentence take on the Snyder Cut, which I don't think will be controversial. Mike can correct me if he doesn't agree, but I think whether or not you wanted it, whether or not you like Snyder, whether or not whatever, it's the biggest single news story of the year that isn't directly related to the pandemic.
Yeah. Look, I like for people to be happy, right? And I don't like to rain on anybody's parade, and I don't care enough about it either way, because I thought Justice League was a wholly mediocre movie, and I didn't really like BVS. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy that the people that wanted the Snyder Cut, released and completed, I'm happy that they're getting a chance to see it. Plus, Sean O'Connell's a buddy, and he's writing a book about it, and I'm hoping this will help him sell a bunch more copies of it. So, other people happy. I was prepping
a book, and I had to get clearance from CBS because I theoretically have a no compete clause in my contract. So you have to get all that shit okayed. And in the months it took for them to finally say okay, Sean had announced his book in the interim. And I was just like, man, there are people who are definitely interested. There's not enough people interested to do two books on this same incredibly niche thing at one time.
Probably not, but
no.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm happy it's out there. I'll watch it as a curiosity, but I thought Justice League was really, really mediocre. How much better can this be?
Yeah.
But we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, my personal take on it was I spent a lot of time as a kid being a nerd, being bullied, and now the nerds are the bullies. And it's, and the bullies have won. But that was my take on the whole thing. Listen, right, like I say, whole bunch of stuff we can get back to.
It's rough to get into something that takes an hour for other podcasts to talk about in the last minute and a half. Indeed.
Listen, if we could get you back, maybe in about a month's time, perhaps, because I think the way that we've seen this pandemic go, I mean, I quite like that meme that we've lived through 6 decades, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s, and 2020. You paraphrase it, but it has felt like an entire decade in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes, it has.
But the fact that the footprint seems to change on a day-to-day basis. I'd love to get you back in a month's time and see where we are, even in 4 weeks' time. So
yeah,
I'd love
absolutely.
to be back.
Certainly from both of our perspective, we both cover a lot of TV and a lot of comics, and I think those places are where it's changing much faster than in features. And
Absolutely.
so I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun kind of coming back in a month and being like, haha, we were wrong about everything.
As I usually am. Happy to do it. Just let me know and I'm happy to come back.
That's pretty much how I start every single one of these shows. But there we go. Mike and Russ, thank you so much indeed for coming on. Mike, if you'd just like to say, Mike, where can people find you and your work online?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mike Avila. Very easy. And my work is almost all of it is at sci-fi-wire.com, including my weekly comics column Behind the Panel. And
no, if you want a copy of that really long Image Comics documentary, direct message me. We'll sort something out.
Okay. I want to see that. I'd like to see it.
See the way I did the edits. Yeah, it was fair enough. And Russ, yourself, where can people find you online?
I'm at RUSS BURLINGAME, which I didn't put my Twitter handle here, but I did put my name, so you can just it's that exactly. On Twitter and Facebook, on Instagram, there's a period after Russ. But you can find my work at comicbook.com. I'm a senior staff writer there. I've been there almost 10 years now. And then I have an unrelated movie podcast called the Emerald City Video Podcast, which is hosted by myself and a handful of other people who used to work at a video store called Emerald City Video about 10, 12 years ago. And we talk about mostly geeky stuff because that's who we are, but not explicitly geeky stuff.
It is very good. I'll put my endorsement on that one.
Really? You're one of the 5 people who listens.
Oh, yeah. But no, I'm a fan. It's a great podcast. So there we go. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and hopefully we'll see you in about a month's time. We'd love to have you back.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Good seeing you, man.
Michael, you are clearer than you've been the whole call right now. Just I gotta say,
yeah.
It's been raining nonstop down here, so it's been wreaking havoc with the connection. My apologies.
No, you were understandable enough to me. It's just the image is so much crisper than it's been the entire time, and now we're saying goodbye.
Well, next time it'll be clear enough. Hopefully, you guys can ask me about the picture over my shoulder. Can't believe none of you guys have asked me about it.
Well, we couldn't really see it. That's the thing.
No. Kurt Cobain and me in college.
Oh, crazy. Okay, fair enough. I mean, when it comes to mic
conversation. When
it comes to mic drops, there you go. He's one.
And with that, I bid you guys farewell.
Take care. Thank you very much indeed, guys. Thanks
See you guys.
Take care. Excellent stuff. So there you go. That's Russ and Mike. Like I say, we'll try and get them back on because we could just keep going on and talking about all sorts of pop culture stuff. Brilliant guests. Thank you very much indeed for coming on, and thanks for everybody who got their comments in. I mean, we kind of missed a couple, but certainly things that we were getting into in regards of trades and floppies and people's attitude to that. Solicitor Smeg, I can't switch to trades. I know it's not about the money, but how sad would you be if you got the trade of the next Action Comics #1 instead of getting a floppy worth God knows how much? Yeah, I get what people's takes on the older I get. I mean, I think I'll put this up on screen. The older I get, the more I'm veering towards collections rather than single issues. They look better on the shelf, but I still feel I'm cheating on copy floppies. Yeah, it's an awkward situation, but there we go. Right. I do want to touch on a couple of the other things that I mentioned at the top of the show, including conventions, which we have kind of seen the entire landscape change. We've seen shows either postponing or indeed cancelling and just moving straight on to 2021. We touched on that on the show, of course, obviously. But there are 1 or 2 outliers, 1 or 2 shows that have turned around and said that, no, we are going to still strive forward and we're going to do our best to bring the show going forward, which includes Atlanta Comic Con, which was announced less than 24 hours ago, stating that it's going to go ahead July 31st to August 2nd, which is incredibly bold of them. It's been a crazy couple of months. Thankfully, we now know that ACC 2020 will move forward with added sanitation and safety measures enacted by government, CDC and Georgia World Congress Center, designed to keep attendees, exhibitors, guests, and staff as safe as possible. Below is the press release, which basically stated it announces its commitment to making Georgia World Congress Center and Savannah Convention Center 2 of the leading convention centers in the country to achieve GBAC star accreditation for cleaning, disinfection, and infectious disease prevention. So it was more a statement from the actual building itself. I found it really bold of them to come out and say this and to put these statements forward, and they're announcing guests left, right, and center. It's like we mentioned on the actual show itself, the idea of being able to predict what is going to happen in terms of second wave, in terms of how far the curve is being flattened, certainly in the UK, certainly in the US, whether that curve is even crest at this point, and where we are seeing some kind of proper delineation of the numbers to make it worthwhile and make it the ability to actually put these shows on. We got Solicitor Smeg say, does Russ know he's still on the screen? We have removed him. He's still here. We could have him back on if we wanted. He's there. I mean, but I think he's just kind of watching in the background at this point. Hello, Russ. I
muted myself, so I wasn't interrupting. But yeah, I was hanging on. I figured I'd chat with you after the fact, since I didn't chat with you before.
No worries, no worries. Well, I'll tell you what then. I'll make it relatively quick about what we're talking about. So we've got Atlanta Comic Con. We've got Tampa Bay that has turned around and said that they're still going ahead. We've got London Film and Comic Con that has yet to announce that that's discontinued. One show that I know a lot of people have been very curious about, and where we're even going to see any kind of announcement, is Star Wars Celebration. Considering that it is going to be held at the Convention Center at Anaheim, at which point they had a November show that was cancelled yesterday, which was BlizzCon, the celebration of Blizzard Entertainment, which is a massive celebration of the likes of World of Warcraft, Overwatch, etc. That's November. So how does that even? Okay, if you listen, if I'm going to get upstaged by Kermit the Frog, it's not difficult. All right, it's not difficult to do. But how that's even going to even operate? How are we going to see Star Wars Celebration? Which means we're talking two major repop shows that are still being bullish enough to. I mean, they're selling tickets. They are still going. That it's still going ahead, and yet we are seeing shows beyond that window that are cancelling and feeling that we are not at the end of this by any stretch of the imagination. So Michael P., who has been following the statistics of the COVID-19 pandemic very, very closely and seeing how the possible effects on a state-by-state basis, Michael has done a good job of keeping a close eye on this. Dragon Con says it's still a go. I just can't quite, I mean, we talked about it on the show. We can't quite see how shows can even operate in any kind of meaningful interaction in 2020 unless we see some real significant improvement. New York, how on earth Repop can go ahead with that at this point? And I'm a huge Repop supporter. I mean, we've had Mike Armstrong on the show on numerous occasions. I personally can't see how that's going to go ahead. Okay. We've gone on a little bit longer than we wanted to because we've been wanting to try and keep these 2-hour shows. But you know what? It was well worth talking to Russ. It was well worth talking to Mike. And I hope you enjoyed them coming on the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Something that I'm going to be, I have announced already on my social media, but I'm going to be putting a little bit further forward in the next couple of days, is the fact that I was being involved in the Tripwire Awards. This is a celebration of comic book talent across the board, from editors to publishers to new talent as well. I was part of the nomination and voting team that puts forward the nominations, and I'm now, by the looks of things, going to be part of the presentation as well, because what we're going to be doing, they were going to be doing the awards live at Portsmouth Comic Con in the May show, which was put back until August. And then now it's been put back to 2021. So since the show itself has been cancelled, we are going to go ahead with the award ceremony. Do check my social media feed at Englishman SDCC. If you are a comics fan, anyone can enter and anyone can put their votes to the flag on this particular awards. We're going to be closing the awards voting on midnight on Monday. So that's the 1st of June. If you want to get your votes in, do that as soon as you possibly can, because we're then going to start collating and letting everybody know who's won, so we can get some videos in And basically, we're going to be doing a live streaming ceremony on the 16th of June. Looking forward to putting that up. It's going to be not on this channel. It's going to be on the Tripwire YouTube and social media, but we'll spread the links as best we can. And yeah, if you want to join in, we'd love you to watch the ceremony. But if you want to get your votes in, it's time to do it now. We're going to be closing those votes on midnight on Monday the 1st. So please get those in. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed it. Back again on Sunday. We've got ourselves some more great guests on the way for the rest of the month. Let me just wrap that down and bring up this particular piece of video, because we've got ourselves something that I wanted to share. Where is it? It's disappeared. Oh yes, the rest of the guests for the Robin Jones is going to be talking to us on Sunday, but we have got ourselves a special show that's going to be happening tomorrow. We're going to be talking to Christopher Butcher, who is the organizer of the TCAF, Toronto Comic Art Festival. But they have a crowdfunding that they're wanting to promote, and he's going to be coming on to talk about that for about half an hour. Our incidental episode, that's tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow for the show. If not, we'll see you on Sunday for another Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. From myself and from Mike and from Russ, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. I can't do a decent Kermit impression. That's a killer.